one of the things that I notice with almost all elite parkour athletes is that they do a lot of calming of their nervous system prior to jumping. Occasionally, with athletes who are coming up, who are maybe very physically powerful, they're not too fearful, and they're just maybe trying stuff that they're not fully ready for, or they have a coach who doesn't really understand what high level performance looks like. You'll see the opposite. You'll see people who start like screaming and slapping themselves and trying to prepare themselves to do something. And I always get so afraid when I see that, right? Like the movement quality always just tanks, and you're always like, that's an athlete who's so much more likely to get injured. Matt McInnes Watson, welcome to the Evolve Move Play podcast. It's fun to get to talk to you. I've been enjoying watching you kind of put out a very specific sort of approach to plyometrics and jump training. And my understanding is you came from originally a soccer background and then became a high jumper. And then you had a coach who was a big influence of yours who had a kind of specific Soviet lineage of plyometrics that you, I don't know, it's funny, like you don't normally think of this in the strength and conditioning world, but it sort of reminds me of like a martial arts lineage. It's like you've been handed down this lineage.
Yeah, it was like my sensei kind of, he's kind of passed down the baton or the sword or whatever it would have been. But I appreciate thank you for first of all for having me on. It's a pleasure to talk shop with someone like yourself. So yeah, that is kind of my strange way into this. Like it like on even the most like basic like relationship and family um kind of part of my life all relates back to like I met my wife high jumping and I like and it's like everything that we have done has been so related, like just everything is in my life is kind of goes back to having started this journey as an athlete, and then kind of now it's my job to help people and try to build this just education I think for people, and just really like a brief glance into what I think I experienced from my coach Eric, and it's like it's kind of like my kind of been a bit of a passion to show people the door, because I think that I still feel like I can probably deliver about 20% of what he could. It's one of those things. I had a really interesting thing from someone with Dr. Michael Yessis, if you know who he is. It's
Yeah.
like his passing is devastating to the industry because there's just so much knowledge that we would never have learned about, or wasn't written in books or talked about online. We have the opposite now, right? Everyone wants to tell you absolutely everything now in the online
Yeah.
space. We miss that old adage of like, if people just holding a few things closer to their chest of a tighter knit community, and rather than like just giving everything out. So it's kind of been my movement through my career as an athlete, and now into what I do as a profession and being a lifelong mover.
Yeah, it's an intriguing observation. I don't know how much to dig into the beginning, but this idea that we live in the tyranny of information, right?
Yeah,
Like I was reading this article about like how many gigabytes of information are produced like every day now compared to all of human history. And
crazy.
so we have so much information, but what we don't have is like feel and intuition and like deep sort of like in the trenches knowledge, right? Like
Yeah,
you may understand, the ground contact times you're working with for a specific plyometric exercise and the underlying biology, neurobiology in a way that wasn't available to your coach or your coach's coach. Um, they might not have been able to tell you to the same precision why they're doing what they're doing, but they had like a deep lived, perspective and
yeah,
that allowed them to, you know, help athletes grow by really, really being able to tend to in the moment what was needed. And I think, it's very easy for us in the social media era to see someone who speaks really articulately, maybe moves well, maybe has some good coaches, maybe is really good at a sexy soundbite, and not be able to see that underlying quality that you're sort of pointing out with your coach that you feel like you're maybe only at 20% of, even though there may be other areas that you're now like really surpassed his knowledge level.
Yeah, the objectivity of what we try to achieve now is, yeah, it really is overtaking like the subjectivity of like you say, those sensations. I call it sensational coaching. Like my coach Eric was like, he did not care about the data in that given moment. Like it meant
Mhm.
nothing to him, because if he saw something different in front of him, it's,
Yeah.
we're working in an objective sport. There is a task to complete, and it's the same in the parkour world,
Yeah.
right? If you don't achieve it, you know that you didn't achieve it. It's pretty clear.
Yeah, for sure.
So everything then needs to become like, what feelings did I feel, not feel? Why did it feel like that? And how can I create sensations that I want to create to achieve that objective? Um, and unfortunately, it does not sell on on social media platforms. Like you say, the algorithms don't like it. The objective kind of view of a lot of things that we do nowadays really isn't. Um, it's not sexy anymore. It's not to get into the weeds of getting those nuanced parts. I don't think people enjoy as much. But every single coach that I've seen as what I would class as like a master of their craft is talking about those things, small
Yeah.
nuances, things that they see live with their eyes, like the coaching eye, or just the eye of people, of how they understand what's happening in front of them is a dying breed. And we have
Mhm.
like video playback people. It's just like I'm standing behind a camera and I take it and then
Yeah.
I'm looking back at what happened. Um, and I kind of promote to a lot more people to take that away. Take it if you need to take it, but be away from that. Be live in what's happening, and
Yeah.
you'll understand so much more sensationally. Yeah, it's hard to come across nowadays.
That you know, I was watching my son. I have a really athletic son. He's 10 years old, and he was working on an approach jump to try to touch a ledge yesterday after his Ninja Warrior parkour practice. And I couldn't, like, with the light quality and everything, like he was like, how close am I to the thing? And I like couldn't tell. So I pulled out my phone and I filmed it slow motion so that we could actually get like a freeze frame for where that hand placement was. Um, and so like that's a really powerful tool. It's a really valuable tool.
Mm,
The interesting thing is to think about, like, every time we pick up these tools, sort of like, what are we sacrificing? Right?
yeah,
Like, here's a super crazy analogy, but we cook food, right? That's pretty great. Makes food taste good, makes food really easy on our bodies. And because of that, uh, we don't have teeth that are as strong. We don't have jaws that are as wide, are as physically powerful as our ancestors were, right? If you go back and look at a Neanderthal or a or they have much more developed jaw muscles. It's like, you know,
yeah,
and then of course, as we have more and more hyper palatable, like if your beef is all wagyu, you're not going to develop your jaw muscles, and you don't even think about that. You're like, oh, we bred better tasting, more tender cows, and now we're not getting any actual exercise of our mind, and so of our jaw. And then we could think, like, as we have tools like this, you don't have to have sensitivity, right? Like, I don't have to train my eye to see how close my son is to touching it. I don't have to train my eye to be able to, like, when I first I trained with a fairly elite track team. I don't know if you are familiar with Mike Cunliffe. His daughter Hannah Cunliffe was like a 6-time national champion.
yeah.
So I got to train with him for 11 weeks back in 2011, I think. And one thing I realized was that, like, I just had no idea what speed looked like. Right? Like I like, having never been around athletes who move like that. Like, I couldn't tell actually who was running really fast at first, and then by the end of it, like, you could just see the athletes who were really fast. But there was a kind of physical sensitivity to what there was an ability to pick up what's salient about how now an athlete works and whether they're actually expressing speed, um, that only came through exposure.
Yeah. Well, and you, like you say, through, like you lose those through a screen and stuff, you lose that almost those sensitivity of like of touch and feeling. Like
Hmm.
one of the most distinctive memories for me as a high jumper was finishing my competition and then watching an Olympic medalist high jump in front of me 10 feet away and take off
Yeah.
on an indoor facility, which was, it's like you run on kind of boards that are kind of stilted up maybe 4 or 5 feet. So it lifts the whole platform up. And seeing someone jump over 7'7", two
Hmm.
meters 30 at 10 feet, like
Yeah.
you don't get what that is until you've been that close.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just like the reverberation of feeling, it's like he put his foot into the ground and it was as if a shotgun went off in the background.
Hmm.
It's that
Yeah.
kind of, it's electric in a way.
Yeah.
And I tell everyone to go and watch world class track and field. Um, and you know, you still get some of that when you go to basketball games or American football games, but there's still another level up from that when you go to world class track events, and you're like, oh, this is actually what we can do, and these are the more subjective things that I can pick up on when I'm thinking, oh, my athlete moves really well, and then I see someone do what they do on a track, and you're like, there's another level to what human beings can handle. And yeah, I think we're very, also we just get so much of it online, right? We just see these crazy feats that happen all the time. I'm sure you see it
Hmm.
in the
Yeah.
parkour community. I was
Yeah.
around Tim Champion last January. I was just like, is there anything that I could throw something in any direction at you and you will figure it out? So it's like we're getting more and more exposed to that as well, but it's through that camera lens
Yeah.
99% of the time.
Tim's a really extraordinary athlete. Callum Powell from Storer, he
Yeah.
made a joke once that nobody ever actually like does anything in parkour first. It's just because Tim's not there.
I can imagine it. I can imagine it.
Yeah,
I-
it's pretty crazy. Um, but okay, my experience like that of the high jump was we had an athlete named Tatum Taylor who went on to play running back for the Oregon Ducks, and I think he was 16 that year. And if I remember correctly, he ran 10:33, which is like fourth in the country as a
okay.
16-year-old,
Yeah.
which is blazing, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, like the first day that I got to the track practice, I was 30 at the time. I had one of my like best parkour athletes. He was the best. He's one of the top like five probably speed parkour athletes in the country at the time, named Justin Sweeney. And so we went in there, and we they lined us up against 14-year-old girls, and we got cooked. Like like we did like a 60-meter sprint, got beat by like 5 meters. Um,
Oh yeah. Oh
and like at the time I was squatting like 355. I had a close to 10-meter standing broad jump. It was like 9 feet 10 inches, 32-inch vertical, and like these 14-year-old girls just cooked us. Um, so at some point, like we started to figure it out, right? Like because we did have really elite physical abilities, and it was just exposure to this. But there was a point at which he put me behind Tatum and made me chase Tatum, um, which was ridiculous. Like basically it was like Tatum ran 5 yards for every 4 yards that I ran. But the feeling of watching him just disappear
oh
was
yeah.
incredibly educational. It was like, wow, okay, this is another world entirely.
Yeah.
And yeah, it really. So to wrap it back to that conversation about your coach, I think I mentioned that one of my big mentors is John Vervaeke. Have you ever heard of John
Yeah.
Vervaeke?
Oh yeah.
Yes. John talks about this model of knowledge. There's propositional knowledge, which is essentially stored in semantic memory, right? It's like, who's the fastest athlete of all time? Usain Bolt, right? Like, so we both know that, right? But someone could know that and have never watched him sprint, could know that and have never, someone who actually was there, or someone who trained with him, or someone who ran next to him. It's a very different experience of what knowing is. And then there's this procedural, right? Procedural knowledge is like, I can do it. I know what good sprint technique feels like. I know how to do a block start or something like that. That's procedural. And then there's perspectival, which is sort of like uh, that's stored as your episodic memory. So that's what it's like to have been there, to have seen it, to have experienced it. It's like no matter how many times you describe it or try to extract whatever logical coherence out of that moment that you saw this guy jump 7'7", nobody else gets to feel it the way that you felt it, and then won't form them the same way. And the last part is called participatory knowledge, which is um, basically is what gives you your sense of self, right? So it's like what kind of how you are formed by these things, and I think that it's really just an interesting point that's come up here, kind of totally randomly at the beginning of our conversation, that when we're kind of aspiring to grow as coaches, right? In an era like this, where we can spend so much time watching video, so much time trying to pick up the latest thing from the smartest influencer who's, whatever, read the latest book. It's actually really easy to forget that, like, fundamentally, what gives you the best ability to solve the athlete's problem in the moment right there exists below the level of those propositions.
Yep. Yep.
So I thought that was just wanted to link that in. I mean, I don't know if you have anything else to say about, like, maybe you could talk about what you saw in Eric along those levels that maybe we're missing for a lot of young coaches coming up, and how they might go get that.
I think what always stood out to me is that I knew that Eric had experienced a lot of this. So, like, talking about those segments of knowledge, I knew that he had felt those sensations and it had experienced a lot of this stuff, because upon me seeing what I thought was an athlete that we'd look up to, was kind of like oh, but he still isn't doing this and he still could use this. And it was like this feeling of like, oh, okay, like he is normalizing the like what was potentially not normal to me and the group of
Mm-hmm.
athletes around us. So you straight away started to form this respect, I think, because he was still able to pick apart the Olympic champion, or do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I think those levels of knowledge are, they are earned and respected. Like it is time in the sport doing the thing, which again seems to become a very apparent thing with the online world now, and how we don't have to be face to face with people and getting these experiences. And he comes from an era of, like, he told me that learning the high jump when he was a high jumper, he had an old reel that he would run in his attic, and he watched Dick Fosbury do the exact same jump so many times that the reel ran out and you couldn't
Yeah.
see him jump anymore. It was wearing out so much. So it was like, how do I master a craft? By just seeing one thing over and over and over again, and also look at ways in which that could also become better. Because in nowadays terms, what Dick Fosbury jumped to win the Olympic medal in 68 is, we have 17, 18 year olds that have jumped that, and can,
Mm-hmm.
and we continue to jump a lot higher than that just to make an Olympic team. So it always really intrigued that as like a real baseline of thinking for him and his knowledge. And then it was, nothing was about the objective goal. It was all about what we were experiencing in the moment with every drill and component that we did. Example at the moment for me is, I have an athlete that doesn't feel ready for his triple jump competitions coming up. He wants to qualify for the nationals, and picked up a bit of an injury. Not an injury, but he's got a sore lower back. So we're having to do a lot of things that aren't getting specifically ready for triple jumping. So he's not able to run his full approach and triple jump.
Yeah.
And it reminded me, which I'd forgotten about, that Eric did a lot of that. Like we weren't doing that many high jumpy things. We're talking days, maybe a week away from a competition, and it always, like, I was like, I just need to feel this certain thing, and he was like, no, we're going to get all those feelings and sensations in all of these other drills. And
Mm.
often when I was in that frame of mind, it also took away that objectivity from because it is, high jump is a mind game. It's you and
Yeah.
that bar. No one else
Hmm.
can change or influence you. It's the same as parkour, right? For you to achieve
Yeah.
something, no one's tackling you in midair.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
So it it very much, it was always this feeling. I had to create feelings. And once I'd created those feelings, it didn't matter where I created them. I just needed to feel that sensation, and that's kind of what Eric built into me as a jumper. Um, and when I felt vulnerable to it, or felt vulnerable to my approach not being good or my takeoff not being good in those specific environments, we always detached from that a lot. And it was like,
Yeah.
we can work on other things for you to just feel those sensations. And my best jumps ever, I didn't high jump the week of the competition. I ran my approach up to a basketball hoop and we just
Mm.
created sensations. And actually, it was just about what I felt. It wasn't this like, I have to do everything perfectly to jump what I want to jump. So yeah, there's a bit of a rambling, but
No,
it was
no, I
all.
think it really connected actually to what I said there. Is kind of beautiful because I don't think there's an objective way to measure what he was doing there, right?
No,
Like,
no,
we don't have a way of saying for this athlete, this drill will evoke the feeling that they need in order to kind of succeed in this other thing. This like deep sensitivity to the awareness of like, let's try this and like, what is the feedback from the athlete? What are they feeling, and how does that relate to the feeling that they need when they're actually doing the task? I was my tendency, I think, is pretty common, with kind of like excessively intellectual people and also people who are naturally high force producers. Um, I just tend to effort more on everything, right? It's like,
yeah,
in order to get it better, just do it harder.
yeah,
And so it's like I was working on a front flip over a block a couple of days ago, and I just found myself like going into that groove of like, okay, more aggressive on the approach, more aggressive like this, and I just had to remind myself it's not really force limited. It's a rhythm and timing thing,
yeah,
and it's a feel. Where is my body in space relative to where it needs to be to
yeah.
achieve this? And like, where's the error in the rhythm? So running faster into the approach isn't going to help me feel the rhythm better.
No, it probably takes away, right? It
Yeah.
takes away your awareness proprioceptively where you are in space because it's actually happening at a faster rate.
Hmm.
Right? You're just
Yeah.
hoping that it's going to give you more power so
Hmm.
that you can be like, oh, well, I've got more time in the air, when actually you notched it down 5%. It's not
Hmm.
going to reduce the power at all, but you're going to feel it sensationally a lot better connected to it.
Yeah. That capacity to connect to
Yeah.
the rhythms of skills and the sort of like how the forces move through the body, the timing of the forces moving through the body, and you know, uh, being in the right position with the right tension and the right relaxation. Um,
Exactly.
and that the ability of a coach then to recognize where the attention is shifted in the wrong direction, or what's an activity that's going to then attune that athlete into what we need them to be approaching,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's going to
It
be
made
very,
me
very
think
hard.
actually, whilst when you were mentioning that first, it was that um, we definitely find ourselves in a time where it's like, especially in the strength and conditioning world, and it goes the same in track and field. Like, these are the drills that get us ready the best for an event.
Hmm.
And Eric was always the opposite. Eric would say, do the things that you need to get yourself ready for this. Now, obviously,
Hmm.
you had to have a reasonable, experienced athlete. You can't just have a 10-year-old and say, do this. You have to show them the ropes a little bit. But and I often use that with my athletes, and they're a little bit like, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, what makes you feel good? What makes you feel connected to the things that you're going to have to achieve when you do this skill? They're like, oh, well, I like this. I like to get the feeling from this. And I'm like, cool. Well, then piece those drills or movements together before you're about to do the thing. And we we're always chasing the research says that this activates you in the best way possible.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of what we miss is that we're all going to warm up. We're all going to probably activate pretty well. It's pretty obvious.
Hmm.
Where we miss is how well our brain is processing the timing and rhythm, like you mentioned,
Hmm.
and getting that just bodily connection. Like when I put my foot down into this position in this specific drill that I like, it gives me those sensations, and I'm going to repeat those sensations when I go to do the execution of, you know, the game or the movement that I've got to do in my sport. And that was really powerful in building like autonomy in athletes as well. When
Yeah.
I was in that training group with Eric, and it's definitely I've made it a mission of mine to try and drive that into my athletes, is to have that autonomy to, if I'm not there, you can go to those, well, what things feel good and what sensations do I like? It gets me ready for that. So yeah, it's just a random thought that I had off of that, but I think it's pretty relevant.
Yeah, yeah. That again, it's sort of like a felt sense that's not going to be captured by having read all the latest, plyometric literature.
Exactly.
And it definitely rings for me. I was mentioning before we jumped on the call, my son is a really talented athlete. He's 10 years old, and he's competing in Ninja Warrior competitions and in wrestling. So he's at, like, kind of was in a season where he's doing both. And it's very interesting to sort of go through both experiences with him. Um, and in the ninja in particular, I noticed that he doesn't need that much, right? Like he doesn't need that much feedback, and he's like, it's actually very easy to kind of trip him up mentally because he's really smart too, and so he'll get stuck on things, right? One thing we noticed with him is that he has really poor hinge mechanics. Like he really struggled to hinge his back, and so
Mm.
I've been working with him a lot on like just deadlift patterns and hinging. So I asked him like what he needed to think about before his match, and he's like, well, keep my back straight. And I was like, no, throw that one away. That has zero.
Yeah,
We want zero attention to that particular aspect of your thing,
yeah,
right? Like you got to be thinking about how you're interacting with the other person, not about what your body's doing. Um, but but as we were kind of preparing for his last ninja competition, we got like after the warm up, we've got like an hour and a half or something before he gets to run, and it's like, well, we've like I have. He's also like pretty sensitive to like me overcoaching him. So like I'm looking at all the obstacles and wanting to break him down and offer him strategies, and like, okay, I gotta like read what he actually is
mm,
asking for, and so
yeah,
I'm like just trying to hold it back. And so I just ask him like, okay, do you feel prepared? Do you feel like you understand everything you need to do? Are you warmed up? Do you need anything? And at a certain point, he's like, yeah, I'm good. And then I just let him go. And so like for 45 minutes, he's just playing on the rig and hanging out with his buddies. And I'm like over there just like dying to say a bunch of shit to him that's not going to help him at all, right? It's going to directly inhibit him by overloading him.
yeah,
And it was a real interesting sort of lesson in like understanding as a coach, like we have anxiety, like how much of the time are we like talking to our athletes not because of what they need, but because what soothes us emotionally to
yeah,
be able to do.
yeah. Well, it's that. I think it becomes, again, Eric was very much like this. Like these competitions in my mind were like life or death,
Yeah,
and to him, they were a learning experience
yeah.
for me.
Hmm.
And I think, and I take my hat off to you. I have a daughter, and we have another one on the way, a
Yeah.
son on the way, and I dread what I'm going to feel like when I'm coaching them. But I have to see it as a learning experience. I have
Hmm.
to see it as, whatever sport they play, I can't walk them through everything. I can't tell them what they're going to feel or what they have to prepare for. And I've been, I try to. You do have to obviously care that you have an athlete that finds something really important and valuable in that given moment. They traveled for it, da, 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 da. But at the same time, it's all about their own preparations, and them feeling ready in themselves. Um, And yeah, I had a recent one with an athlete that was not prepared for certain circumstances to come up,
Mhm.
and he learned a lesson. you know.
Yeah, it's, generally the nice thing about these competitions is there's always another one. There's chances to learn, and that's a coach's lesson too, right? Like, my son was training parkour with me since he was a tiny little tot, right? And so we started going to this ninja gym because they had some parkour equipment and it was a nice place for us to train during the winter months and everything. So we're training in there, and they had a competition coming up. And it's like, well, you can't compete in parkour. There's no parkour competitions anywhere nearby. So we're gonna have him compete in ninja. So he goes in and he wins his first competition against kids who are training on ninja teams, right? And we're like, oh shit, this is cool. Um, so then we go back to his second competition, and he gets in his head about it, and he falls off the first obstacle, and just a totally, just a mental error, right? So then the third competition, he falls again early on the course, and as he comes off the course, like I'm right away, just like trying to break down what happened, where it's going, like giving him all this information. The boy's 8 years old, right? And so he came back, and he finished fourth in the next competition, and then he finished second in the last competition of the year, right, at the regionals, which is really impressive for a kid at this point who's still never actually trained the sport.
Mm.
Um, but then the next year, like had so much pressure in his head, he just didn't want to compete because of the way that like a lot of it had to do with the way that I responded to him when he came off the course. So then we we took a year off. Then we competed ninja again. Then he joined the wrestling team. He's competing wrestling, and he kind of crushed it in wrestling. He's 8-1 as a novice, and so we go up to the open division, and he's competing in open for the first time. And the first match, he just gets massacred, right? Pinned in 30 seconds, never has a chance. Second match, he is much more competitive, but the kid beats him like 15-4. But you could see how much he did. So when he came off, it was just like praise, praise, praise. Here's what you did better. Here's what you did better. Here's what you
Yeah,
understood. This is what like. I'm so proud of how much effort you put in, and and then that just changes everything, right? Like,
absolutely. It,
and
yeah,
just remembering it's a learning opportunity.
it's a learning opportunity, especially at that age. Yeah, I know I'm going to be guilty of it, so I can pass no judgment. Um, but it's a learning curve, and it's a learning curve for you to understand what the athlete is learning, right?
Yeah,
And I think that's the reflection that you've got to have is like, oh, what did you learn? What was different today? Like, why did you feel like that? And they come back with, you know what? I was just so nervous. I put so much pressure on myself, and that's why I made that mistake. Then it's
mm-hmm.
like, cool. Well, what can we do to just take that away? Take that feeling of nervousness away. Maybe it's needed. I think
Yeah,
sometimes I had a big learning experience as a high jumper. I was at the national championships and I was feeling amazing, ready to jump the highest I'd ever had. And then I walked out into the stadium and it was like someone pulled a plug out of me and
mm-hmm.
all the air just left my body. And I obviously the over arousal in the warm up room just spiked, and I saw this big crowd, and that was enough to just I should have just put my spikes in my bag and walked out of the arena before I jumped because it was about as good as that. and,
Yeah,
I, and I learned from it. I knew that I had to control that emotion and stuff. So, um, yeah, you learn at
yeah,
every level as well. You learn at 8 years old, and you learn at 28 years old
yeah.
to those sorts of experiences. So, yeah, it's all worth learning.
Yeah, I think a lot of this conversation is just sort of about the importance of feel, um, and just perspective, as coaches, and how much that's really just dependent on experience, and um, putting yourself in the trenches. And
Yeah. Well, and there's also like there's that physical feel and there's that emotional feel as well. Like, are you hanging emotions on those sensations too? Because I also found that when I had levels of stress in me that I didn't need, putting pressure on myself, and that was a form of stress on my body, and it had an experience on me emotionally. then I couldn't feel as much as I wanted to feel,
Yeah.
which was really telling. And in that specific competition where I was called what's called a no jump, where I
Mhm.
did not clear
Yeah.
a single bar. I
Yeah.
had no feel in my body. Like I
Yeah.
could not. I took my first jump and I walked over to Eric and said, I can't feel my feet. And he was
Yeah.
like, what? And I was like, I just cannot feel the connection with the ground. And it was the over arousal and like this
Mhm.
existential dread that then just sat in me like, I can't feel the ground. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
what? So,
I worked I worked nightclub security in my early 20s, and the first time I ever had to take someone out of the bar, I it was not a threatening person. It was like a 5'4", 170-pound lesbian girl, who was mad at me because I told her she couldn't lay on the ground and make out with a girlfriend, but like she got physical about it, right? And I I just grabbed her and like picked her up to take her out of it. So I just had like a double under control hug, but I went like I'm an experienced grappler, so I went to like do an S grip, and my fingers didn't work. So I was literally just pressing my fists against each other because my fine motor control had shut down to such a degree that I no longer functionally had fingers. Um,
it's crazy.
and
It's
so it's incredible what those systems can do, and so we see this interestingly. Like I think about the role of this about hyper arousal in the parkour context. I don't know if you like. I know you said you spent some time with Team Champion. You're aware of the parkour world. I don't know if you've spent any time around parkour athletes doing like actually dangerous high level parkour movement.
I, a little bit with Tim.
Okay.
Tim slid down a palm tree from a
Okay.
5-story car park or parking
Okay.
lot that I was stood on the
Okay.
top of, and I watched him jump from the. So a little bit, but very small. But yeah,
Do you remember his prep at all?
he did a lot of prep. So it was we started at the bottom. He worked his way up, and it was
Yeah.
getting that sensation of just mapping what this was going to feel like, and then it was a lot of measurement between the jump. Like, was he going to be right? It was preparing if he was going to get burns all over his
Yeah.
arms. It was all those sorts of preps, and then also the threat of what if what if the police show up? Like, what
Yeah.
does that look like? And then
That's
getting the
that's
right
cool.
shot, and that also changed everything as well
Yeah.
because it was definitely something for his social media.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and actually,
Wow.
we did a thing down at Santa Monica, down at Venice Beach, and they've got bars that run all along. And he swung from one, cleared the next one, caught
Hmm.
the third
Yeah.
one, and then did another couple of swings. And there was a lot of prep for that, and he was actually too tall for it. So he was actually
Mhm.
like almost
Yeah.
gripping here rather than able to grip. And there was a lot of prep for that. So um, that showed me like it was all sensational. It was all
Mm.
feel. Everything was about feeling what he needed to feel. Like he
Yeah.
didn't need to really measure it. He just needed to feel the distance with his body. He needed to feel what it was going to be like sliding down this tree or
Mm.
re-gripping again when he caught on the bar at a certain like length.
Mhm.
He's like, can I handle that? Or my armpit's going to blow out
Mhm.
out of this
Mhm.
focus,
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that. So yeah, very
Yeah.
much.
That's people see the feats that we do, and they don't understand the kind of sensitivity that you have to develop to like know that you're capable of it and what it feels like to lock in, right? You're not just hucking yourself. Like there's a moment when you're like, okay, this is very doable for me, and I know what it's going to feel like. I know where it is. But one of the things that I noticed with almost all elite parkour athletes is that they do a lot of calming of their nervous system prior to jumping. You'll notice that they do extended out breaths. They'll shake their hands. They're shaking their hands. They
Yeah.
spit on their hands and rub their shoes, even if their shoes have nothing to do with their performance. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, And all of those, I think, are ways of taking the nervous system from excessive arousal down into a place where you still have access to your fine motor control.
Yeah. Yeah.
And occasionally, with athletes who are coming up, who are maybe very physically powerful, they're not too fearful, and they're just maybe trying stuff that they're not fully ready for, or they have a coach who doesn't really understand what high level performance look like. You'll see the opposite. You'll see people who start like screaming and slapping themselves and trying to prepare themselves to do something. And
Yeah.
I always get so afraid when I see that, right? Like the movement quality always just tanks, and you're always like, that's an athlete who's so much more likely to get injured. Um, and so that as you kind of like go along that arousal threshold, there's an optimal place where your attention is really focused, but you have feel, and then there's a point at which your feel starts to disappear.
Yeah.
And then it's the same thing with like the cognitive, right? Like you can think about it too much, and now it's like your brain is demanding all the energy, and you don't have the access to your body. And
Yeah.
those
You
are
have no subconscious reflexive way of moving. Like I don't need to think about how I run. I just run.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
and I don't need, yeah, it's really interesting actually, because one of the biggest things that I felt after I had spent this time with Tim was that I said it to my wife. I was like, I didn't realize how professional I would feel that he was when we came up to do a big
mhm,
stunt or whatever he was doing. I was really quite impressed with it, and maybe that was my complete naivety of like truly world class
yeah,
parkour, but I was kind of fascinated by the processes that he was going through. Or like we drive past a spot and he was citing everything out, and there was a lot, even if it was just simple things like writing notes in his phone and stuff. And I was
mhm,
really impressed by that part, and I was like, well, I guess why wouldn't the sport be like that?
yeah,
Because it is, it's accelerating at such a fast speed at the moment. I think so. People are
insane.
getting far more professional with the approaches that they have, um, and just yourself going through, like saying about like how they calm their nervous system and stuff like that. Are, funnily enough, is what I've not really said to many people about Eric is that Eric comes from a counseling background, and
Hmm.
he had a psychology degree and used to counsel air traffic controllers, and so he had a lot of um, great ways to calm people down and to really, obviously, you can only calm someone down to as much as they want to be calmed down in competition, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
we used to do like a simple thing is that if we were too like highly strung and really over arousing what we were trying to do, he would do things like a simple thing like you're going to put your hands behind your back and you're just going to pull on one of your pinky
Mm.
fingers, and that's going to
Cool.
release all that tension and energy out of you, and then you kind of
Mm.
just breathe that out, and then you find kind of like a center of yourself.
Yeah.
Like I feel centered, I feel connected. Now I'm going to go through the process of right. Okay, let's just recalibrate what we were trying to achieve the first time, but it was just too highly strung.
Mm.
And some athletes wanted to fight that, and everything was shout, scream, and often you just like you say, you see inhibition in movement when people are overly tense. There is no extensibility to the way that tissue works. You can't tap into like reflexive, natural actions because everything is tense. It's clenched fists. It's, you know, the neck muscles
Yeah.
are really tensed up, which then just locks in the shoulders, and everything then becomes this frozen. I always use the phrase, but you're trying to bounce rocks at that point because everything
Mm.
is contracting when it needs to be loose to be able to be taken through that range of motion to give you the energy that you want.
Yeah. We have to have a relaxation and tension relationship, an ability to
Exactly.
rapidly shift between them. And when we ramp the nervous system too high, we get tension without the capacity for the relaxation side of the cycle, the yin to the yang, as you like to talk about.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, this has been quite a different conversation so far than I anticipated, but a fun one. But let's go ahead and shift a little bit more towards some of these technical elements. I am always curious, really, as a parkour athlete, like what is the purpose, or like how do I understand plyometrics as a tool and apply them, given the context of the amount of jumping and eccentric forces and everything that I'm already experiencing in my sport. Um, I hear you talk a lot about locomotive um, plyometrics, and it's like, well, in a sense, parkour is locomotive plyometrics. That's what it
Yeah.
is, right?
Yeah.
So if someone is already doing parkour,
Mm.
what do you see as the role of plyometric practices in supporting that athlete's goals and jumping farther, in um, running faster, in having better rhythm and control, or better resilience to injury? Where
Mm.
where um, where do you see these two perspectives sort of meeting?
So I think the base of everything here for me is having a little bit more of a clinical approach to a training method. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of what you do is very natural, and because you're just reacting to the environment.
Yeah.
And so I get this a lot. I get this a lot in basketball. We do a lot of jumping in basketball, and I always reflect back to, you may do a lot of jumping in basketball, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you are paying attention to what we want to achieve to create the adaptations that we hope from what we understand in using plyometrics as a training method.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, they all might be jumps, but all those jumps aren't created equal. So
Yeah.
a lot of the jumps that you will do are going to be economically built for you to continue in your pursuit of what you're trying to achieve in that
Mm-hmm.
given moment. And you have an objective to get to this point or to achieve this, then you're not going to be using maximal effort in every single movement that you do. In very few occasions are you going to do that. You're going to use a few strides here and there that are going to take the brunt of the load. So the eccentric demand or the downwards phase to everything is going to be a little easier. Whereas I can use the clinical environment of doing plyometric practice to actually place the biggest eccentric demands on you that could then relay into those skills, so that actually those movements in a given parkour situation just feel easier. It feels easier for me to land and move out of this. Um, and again, can I take you beyond the demands of your sport? Maybe not so much in some of the landings that you do, but can I actually get you to land and take off and give you that added stress,
Mm-hmm.
that really is gonna, it's just gonna reap the rewards with regards to your reactive strength, how well you can react and get out of a movement or a landing. So yeah, it's looking at making things a little more clinical so that we don't just assume that we're going to get these changes. And that's always the way. Everyone is going to be slightly different
Yeah.
with how they move. So you could all be doing the same kind of challenge in a given moment, right? You're out doing parkour and there's five of you trying to do the same thing. You're all going to do it differently. If you were to measure every bit of force on every landing and takeoff that you're doing, you can guarantee they'll all be slightly different. And it's because
Mm-hmm.
of your stature, it's because of your weight, it's because of the style that you move in, it's because of the way that you create force. So we know in the research that these movements in plyometrics are going to mostly achieve what we think they're going to. But the
Yeah.
sport is a lot more assumption based. It's like, oh, I do a lot of jumping and therefore I'm powerful and reactive. And then you could take them into a clinical setting and be like, well, you're not, in this real clinical way, you're not actually as reactive as you could be. So
Mm-hmm.
can we give you things that are only coaching that reactivity element into you, or that standing concentric jumping action? So when I see
Yeah.
people do like the 180 catbacks, out of that, do you have that push off ability, which is just pure concentric output, just the
Mm-hmm.
pushing action? If you don't, then we can go away and train that, whether that's in weight training, whether that's in different jumping actions and stuff. but just doing that might not be enough, if you see what I mean. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's
I
what I
totally
was.
do. I mean, I've been playing with strength conditioning methods since the early days of my parkour training, but it's always understanding the right way to think about it, and then how to deal with the relationship between it is really interesting to me. Um, One thing you'll observe in lots of sports is that some athletes seem to be able to make the progress that they make in the sport with almost no ancillary training at all. So,
Yeah,
like, you'll have the guys who are like, okay, I'm doing my weight training, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, and then you'll have some guy who's just like, no, I can run 9.9
yeah,
just by showing up at the track 3 days a week and doing my sprints. I was trying to remember. There was a specific athlete I saw a piece on. He was from uh, one of the Caribbean islands. I can't remember, Kitts and Nevis or something like that. Um,
oh, Kim Collins.
Kim Collins, yes, Kim Collins. Right, this guy runs in like 9.9s for like 15 years, and he gets better in his like late 30s because he doesn't start weight training until his late 30s. I think Carl Lewis didn't start weight training until his 30s as well.
Yeah,
Um, so some athletes are able to do it, and I've watched lots of parkour athletes just do parkour and get immensely strong and powerful, right? A kid will come in, have it, 7 foot standing broad jump, and just through training parkour, a year later is like 8.5 feet, 9 feet. 2 years, 3 years later, right? Muscle ups, all this stuff. They might, you see a lot of experienced parkour athletes with no strength training background pull a double body weight deadlift on their first day of
yeah,
training deadlifts. So like obviously we can get a tremendous amount out of it. And I think that I have this kind of heuristic in my work, which is like train at the highest level of complexity that allows you to target the specific adaptation that you're looking for. And you know, the idea being that when I'm training parkour, I'm developing all of the attributes that I'm looking for as a parkour athlete. Whereas if I spend a lot of time just doing strength conditioning, I'm actually getting a um, much less holistic overall stimulus of the system. And so
yeah.
we've seen a lot of athletes who get really obsessed with the strength conditioning side. They don't actually progress very much in the primary sport.
No,
Um, and so it's like that balance. Um, but I've gone too far the other way too. I know you know my friend Joel Smith, right? I was on his
yeah,
podcast.
yeah,
The first time I was on his podcast, I was talking about the fact that at the time I was able to dunk a basketball without doing really any strength training and just doing my parkour practice. But then I got a couple ankle sprains and got bigger, gained some weight. And I was like, I'm not dunking anymore, and I want to be able to dunk, so I'm getting my butt back in the gym, right? Um, and then yeah, I dunked on a 9 foot, 10.5 inch rim
okay,
with
nice.
off of 3 out of 4 plants, so right, and left
Like
uh,
it.
on my first try. The last time I was there, and I was going to move it up to I didn't have it was an adjustable rim and it was set to
Mhm.
9, 10.5 when I got there, so I measured it up
Yeah.
and I didn't get a chance to try it at 10 feet. So I don't know for sure if I can dunk at 10 feet, but it seems plausible that I'm pretty much there at this stage.
Oh,
But it's
sweet.
because I've been doing some squatting and some other stuff to do
Yeah.
it. So it's like I don't know what changed in the way that I was practicing parkour or where my motivations were or what was happening through the stimulus in my primary sport, or if it's just me aging as an athlete. But at some point, the stimulus in my parkour training alone was sufficient to drive the adaptation to jump that high. But then
Mhm.
I reached a point where it wasn't anymore. And I've seen that with a lot of athletes where they do sort of plateau on those things and they don't realize that. I think the way that I think about it is like um, your primary sport is like the entree of your meal,
Yeah.
and the other stuff is like the little things. Or another way I've thought about it is like you can imagine like rough sketching yourself as an athlete. It's like the rough sketch, that's your primary sport. And the
Yeah.
fine tuned work is where you need to bring in these other little methods to try to like be like, yeah, but I need a little bit more of this.
Yeah.
And the primary thing is giving me a lot, but it's not giving me enough of that. And then how do I go find those tools that dial me in?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I mean, it's the same for myself. I trained a track and field group, and they didn't lift weights until 18, 19.
Mhm.
And the first session we did, you've got guys that weigh, what would they weigh? They would weigh maybe 160 pounds, and they first session they put weight on their back. They'd squat 225.
Yeah.
Um, 6'2", 6'3" guys, and it's the sport that is providing them with those abilities, right?
6'2" and 160 squat and 225 is pretty good. That's not bad.
Yeah, that was me. I was 6'3", 165 pounds as a high jumper. I was
Yeah.
it's just the wind would take me away certain days. I was so
Yeah.
but yeah, it is very much that. And I think you hear about these people that didn't do certain things, they just did the sport, and unfortunately, it's not always the case for all of us. We're all but mere mortals to some of these people. And I think it's always the case that keep doing the sport until the sport can't do it all, right?
Yeah.
And then you start to drip feed it in. I think if you throw it all on at the same time, at a really young age, it's just not needed. And
Mhm.
and and then you're going to plateau out this, your progressive way to improve your strength or to improve your speed is going to slow down. So we
Yeah.
need to give this person a new stimulus every few years. And eventually we get to a stage where they're like, oh, wow, weight training is now really improving my speed, or it's really improving my jump training. And they might be 24 or 25. So, yeah, Americans are very, very keen to do it super
Mhm.
early. And I think it's because it comes from the American football side of things.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
the Europeans aren't so much with that, I don't think.
Yeah. My son, like I said, he's 10 years old. And, he has ninja practice, he has wrestling practice. Between, he has 5 days a week of one sport or the other. And they do conditioning at both of them. And I'm always like, I think he could use a little less conditioning. Just let him do it, right? He's already ridiculously fast and strong and
Yeah,
enduring.
just get good at the skills.
Just give him more skill time, right? I don't think he needs any CrossFit circuits at this stage of his development. Um, he's just like, you know, but you got to kind of, there, yeah, you have trade offs, right? The community aspect and everything else is so good. Um, but but I definitely don't want to load him up with extra conditioning work on top of what he's doing. It's like, if anything,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
he's a
get a
kid as
lot.
well. He's a kid. Kids are conditioned.
Yeah. Oh,
my daughter's my daughter's just come up to 3. And she does not stop. I'm like,
I
you are the
know.
most conditioned human I know. You just don't stop.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he does parkour or basketball every day at recess for
Yeah.
as long as they'll give him outside. He comes home, he plays outside on the tree outside. We take him to practice. He practices for a couple hours. He comes home, he wrestles with the puppy, and
Yeah.
like if he doesn't have an activity for a day, he just like just freaking out.
Just vibrating in the corner trying to get rid of energy.
I'm so jealous, right? Like
Oh, tell me
I
about it.
want to train more. I want to like uh, one of my weaknesses as an athlete has basically been volume tolerance. Like I
I'm
ran
the
into
same.
Ido Portal back in 2012. I just saw my Facebook post from when I was training with Ido in 2012, and Ido's like, if you're a mover, you have to train for 40 hours a week, and I actually worked with a lot of Ito's students who came to me after they burned out from training for 30 hours a week. But I had a good relationship with Ito at that stage, and it was like, there was some sense of like maybe I should go get some mentoring from him, but I was just like, oh, there's no way, right? Like I'm barely surviving 12 hours a week of training right now.
Yeah.
So right
Yeah.
now I've got my Fitbit. I track how many zone minutes I get a week, and I'm like trying to slowly inch it up. And so I'm trying to go up like 5% a week, 6% a week. And then the reality of what happens is that I'll do that for a week or 2 weeks. and then I'll have to take a back off week, and then it's this very slow wave. It's slowly creeping up. But I'm
Yeah.
training right now. Like my high weeks are just under 400 zone minutes a week. My low weeks are like 270. And I was like trying to figure out what my son was doing, and I was like, okay,
Forget it.
it's probably like 1,200
Three.
zone minutes a week.
Yeah,
It's pretty.
I was about to say like 3,000 or something stupid like yeah,
I'm just like,
easily.
dude, if I had the capacity, like, just like, if I could just handle the training load to get there, it would. It's like I want to, like I'm working on a corkscrew right now. It's been like a stupid skill that I work on forever. I got it dialed like a couple springs ago, but I like got it, lost it, bringing it back. It's like I can really only train it once a week, um, on top of all my other training demands. And it's like, dude, if I could just handle two more high
Yeah,
intensity parkour days a week,
I get it. Yeah,
I'd get it. I'd get it so easy. So
yeah.
that's one of
That
my
was me
big
as an
things.
athlete
Building
too.
upon.
I
Yeah.
was exactly that as an athlete. I look at it now and I just call myself like I'm a big cat of the human world.
Yeah.
When I go
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm a 23 hours a day sleeper. Like if I train, I'll want to go and sit and lay on the sofa for the rest of the day doing work. Like I don't
Yeah.
want to be up all day long. And I'm
Yeah.
definitely not the kind of guy that sits in that medium zone and just goes for hours and hours and hours. It's just
Mhm.
not me. I don't think
Yeah.
it ever will be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I fight and eat, and then yeah
Sleep.
yeah everything shuts down.
Yeah.
But
My problem. Yeah. That's a whole nother story. I I wasn't very good at shutting down. That's a big problem with the recovery is like, can you actually get parasympathetic when it's parasympathetic time? And I had
yeah,
reasons that didn't have anything to do with training that I wasn't very good at that, but I'm getting better. So hopefully we'll creep that capacity up.
yeah.
So back to the parkour. When you look at parkour athletes, just sort of as a general stereotype, do you see specific weaknesses that would be best addressed with anything? Imagine you're a parkour athlete to the best that you
Mm,
can. Like,
mm,
okay, I get up, you have a team of 10 parkour athletes that come in and they want a generalized program to be like, what do we need to support this that we're not getting out of our sport? We're all peaked out on broad jump. We haven't broad jumped farther for like 5 years. You
yeah.
know, we want to jump farther. We want to run faster to get
Mm,
farther jumps. But the sport's not doing it for us anymore. Do you have any
yeah.
ideas where you'd start?
Yeah, so I mean, I always look at it. Parkour has a lot of people that probably have rolled their ankles many and many a time.
Yeah,
So
about 10 bad ankle sprains per ankle.
yeah, there you go. So says to me straight away, have you? Everyone likes to rehab from a physical stance, right? The tissue has got better, but has the ankle relearned how to land? And
Mhm.
what I mean by that is, does it have the subconscious proprioceptive awareness of where you are in space? How do I control things? The 80% of ankles, or the reason why most ankle rolls happen is because you've had one prior. Like it's right. It's such a high statistic that you have to base it back on the neurological learning standpoint. So if we have a lot of those kind of athletes, then I like to do a lot of very slightly different nuanced positioned low level plyometrics. So we get a lot of, staggered stance, wide stance, inverting the feet, everting the feet, moving backwards, sideways, moving in a slalom fashion to and fro. And what it starts to do is it starts to remap. And it doesn't really matter at what point you do this. Like I often will get athletes, if they've rolled an ankle, you might spend X amount of weeks just getting the tissue back to where it feels comfortable, getting rid of the swelling. But then as soon as we can get a landing in them, it's that anticipative quality that needs to be reinvigorated. Understanding where they are in space, the proprioceptive awareness, and so on. And I think everyone needs a bit of that if they are in a sport with a you know, high end
Yeah.
of ankle sprains. And obviously there are going to be ankle sprains that you do that you
Yeah.
can't control.
So look, I'm very curious about this.
Hmm.
So I'm 6'1.5". I was 6'1.5" at 14.
Yep.
Between 12 and 14, I grew like a weed, and I was trying to teach myself to sprint when I was 12 years old. And I remember very clearly like getting into like a deep 4-point stance and coming up out of the stance and managing to actually knee myself in the nose. I was that disconnected, right? So around that age, I was running up the stairs in my house. And the stairs in my house, like went up and then there was a landing and then it changed directions. So as I turned, I put my foot on the edge of the stair and I just completely crushed that
Hmm.
TFL. So then I would kind of like have little ankle things, I think, all the way up until I was like 15, 16. But then I got really into pickup basketball. I was homeschooled, so I didn't play like organized basketball, played a lot of pickup. And I landed on people's feet a bunch of times and just wrecked my ankle every time I landed on someone's feet. So, you talk a lot about anticipating landings, but this is like what and about the role of the nervous system, right? Like this is something that I'm huge on this idea that we think that these problems are just tissue problems. It's like you just don't have good tissue integrity in your anterior talofibular ligament. And I'm like, I think a lot of it is actually that the nervous system has lost its mapping
Yeah.
of that tissue and how to control it and how to work well, and that we can get a huge amount of problem solving capacity back into the
Hmm.
system without necessarily like having to surgically rehab that particular, you know, particular system. So I'm actually really curious to hear your thoughts on how we could build anticipation specifically for the problem in basketball of landing on a foot, which in parkour is landing on a root or landing in a hole, right? You have any ideas about that?
It's really tough for those specifics. Now, I'm also of a way of thinking that there is another level to proprioceptive awareness where
Mhm.
you're going to have a better understanding of what potentially could happen as you're coming down and thinking, I literally have no control over what's going to happen. I know I'm going to put my foot down on that.
Yeah.
I know in basketball it's tough. Your eyes are often up, and then
Yes,
your
that's
foot's
the
coming
thing.
down backwards on something.
Going up for a
Yeah,
rebound, and
went up for a
how do
rebound.
you how do you anticipate? How do we build that system to be so much more cat-like when it comes down on the ground?
Well, do you know what the crazy thing is? It might have been Eric that used to say this to me. Is that the damaging part to an ankle roll is the snapback.
Mm.
So it's taking the tissue through the range and
Yeah.
then your brain saying, you need to snap back and
Oh
protect
yeah.
me. Otherwise, you're going to fall over and damage your brain or your
Mm.
vital organs. So
Mm.
that protective mechanism is put in there to protect the vital components of our body. So there's
Yeah. The
we
parkour
need
practice
that.
actually helps here, right? Because you
Yeah.
build your ability to feel comfortable going to the ground. So
Mhm.
rather than trying to stay upright, you let the
Yeah.
stumble take you to the ground.
Exactly. Exactly. So in those instances, I don't think I can give you the answer. I
Yeah.
think that in general, I found that better players often escaped their ways out of being, they understand and know. Like I used to play soccer and I'd have a guy that would play in the center of midfield and could just understand where they were in space. I was a
Mm.
guy that played in defense, so I was on the edge of the game all the
Yeah.
time. If I played in the middle, I didn't know where everyone was around me. But you have players in basketball that will be that way, and they know that there's a player behind them. They know that there's a player here, and I'm controlling a ball that's over there. So it's like, is that just a level of game understanding that also can protect you? I think there's something in that for sure. Um, but if I just look at just that general um, improvement of anticipative qualities and proprioceptive awareness, it goes back to exactly what you said. And remapping those connections. And I call it kind of that you've got a highway of connections, thousands of times you've driven up and down that highway of sending that connection of the brain for the foot to do something, and the foot's going to understand those forces and direction of momentum, and it's going to send it back to the brain, figure
Yeah.
out what we need to do. And I feel like it's that disconnect. It's kind of like chopping through that highway. When you get, the more severe the injury, the stronger that disconnect, right? If you
Yeah.
break something or if you rupture something, it's almost gone.
Mhm.
So it is relearning how to walk and land and understand where you are in space. And I think I always find that when you have someone that's come back from major injury, when they're airbound, they don't know when the ground is going to come to them. And they
Mhm.
don't know then understanding their traveling velocity, their
Yeah.
the parabola of the curve in which they fly in. So it is all about re-engaging those movement patterns and relearning that. And I don't necessarily think that it needs to be done at a really high level in terms of output. I think that a
Mhm.
lot of it can be gained in very low rudimentary movements where you're just building a massive volume back into the system. So
Yeah.
going back to kind of the original kind of question, like what would you do?
Yeah.
That's a huge starting point for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like for parkour athletes, kind of your just general sense is that some extensive plyometrics would be really valuable for them.
Really valuable.
So one thing I've noticed, one of my favorite parkour activities that I do is I live next to a creek with a bunch of big sandstone boulders,
Yeah.
various size sandstone boulders, and they're very grippy because they're sandstone, even when they have moss on them.
Mm.
I love to go to this creek and just run up and down the creek and find jumps. There's lots of jumps that I can do there. There's a few vaults. There's, also cliff diving and awesome stuff on it. But running across these rock fields feels incredibly developmental for that lower limb
Mm-hmm.
and coordination, right? Um, Tissue wise, but also like because every step is variable in, and even there's rocks that are unstable as you put your foot on them. It's like that feels like such a huge thing. The other aspect of it that's really interesting is um, visually it's quite challenging because you have a lot of light dappling and you have an enormous variety of sort of surface angles and shadow on it.
Mm.
And it's really interesting for me when I come from training, primarily training in the ninja gym during the winter, and when the creek comes down enough in water level to go out there and I train
Mm.
on it for the first time, my eye muscles get sore.
You're working so hard to
Yeah,
pick everything up.
yeah, because the information is so much denser visually than the
Yeah.
same information moving across the basic surface
Mm.
at the ninja gym. At the ninja gym, I'm on carpet, gray carpet with overhead direct light. It's the same light everywhere in the gym,
Yeah.
and it's really interesting because why do you sprain your ankle? Because you didn't anticipate the ground properly. So how do we build the capacity in the athlete to pick up a more essentially um, fine-grained map of the terrain that they're moving on, so that then
Mm.
they can anticipate the demands that the tissue is going to be placed on at a higher level. So I actually think that this kind of extensive work in the sense of like running and hopping and bounding up and down the creek could be really developmental for an athlete's general sort of lower body resilience.
Yeah. Huge, huge. And I think that's a really good way to also put it, in that like going back to that like environment versus clinical kind of setting, in that if we go back to doing plyometrics in the perfect environment where your body chooses the output based on what you can do rather than the environment choosing. So I also think about it like this. Is someone like Tim Champion, if he was doing the same training in a group of guys that are all, most people are going to be lesser than him in terms of output, is
Mm-hmm.
he undercooked?
Yeah.
Does he need to go away into an environment where actually I just need to express maximal outputs? I need to express like
Mm-hmm.
maximal capacity of something. So it does then become a way of looking at it like, if I go and do plyometrics and I improve, let's say, just my locomotive ability to every bound is further, every contact can be faster, then when I come to an environment where everything is a lot less than my max, it's a
Yeah.
lot easier. I don't want to
Mhm.
get to an environment where this is 100% of my, because it's just not going to work out like that. Like, you can use the analogy for high jumping. In order to jump high, you need to run faster. So
Yeah.
if my personal best requires me to run at 100%, it's going to be hard for me to go anywhere. I
Absolutely.
need to increase my speed capacity in an event like high jump where you don't run at 100%. I want to be able to do it at 70%. My
Mhm.
70% higher than yours, good luck. I'm going to beat you every time. And it will be the
Yeah.
same in parkour. If everything is within me, then I have the ability then to build. Because, like we were saying before, if that's too much for you, the processing rate is going to be 5 times higher, because you're
Mhm.
thinking this is coming at me so much faster, or I am having to push so much harder to achieve each one of these. So you've got to look at everything within a bandwidth. How
Mhm.
much within that bandwidth are you in this given skill?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because as soon as something becomes more technical, forget about it. Because if the output's super high and the skill's also super high, the
Mhm.
likelihood for you to achieve it is going to diminish.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And if fatigue is super high, that's the other
that's,
aspect.
you
Yeah.
got it all
And
right there.
that's where I feel like most of my injuries have come from, is because from insensitivity to signals of fatigue in myself, like just not accepting that my
Yeah.
body needs rest. But it's interesting. That's it. So I'll tell you, my training right now, it's like I said, my volume capacity is limited. So I try to, like, I have to be really sort of, I'm I'm trying to I'm trying to get a lot out of minimum viable dose, let's say, right? But so what my training looks like is basically once a week I do a mobility workout. So I go to my daughter's ninja class, and
Hmm.
I have an hour to kill, and I use that hour to, like, just do do front splits and back splits, or front splits and side splits and bridges, and build
Yeah.
whatever sort of basic mobility stuff that I want. I'm not super mobile, and I'm not trying to be a Gumby. I just need to sustain the range of motions that are necessary for my sport.
Sure.
Um, so that's sort of day one. That's real light. Day two is just parkour training, right?
Yeah.
In the gym. Day three is my strength training day, and that's dead simple right now. Back squat to a 18-inch box. Uh, Work up to one set of 7 at
Hmm.
the highest weight I can do. Most recent was 325, and then I'll do a pin squat set to a quarter squat position out of
Hmm.
like a 415 or 425.
Hmm.
So I'll bump about 100 pounds right now on that. Um, I just do some overhead pressing or bench pressing and weighted pull ups and muscle ups, right? And then one day a week I'll go to the track, and I do either 5 fly-in 30s, or 300s, or 10 10s, right? That's kind of the standard three that I'm rotating between. And then I
Hmm.
just finish with some plyometrics, which, I'll do more horizontal plyometrics, longer ground contact times if I'm doing acceleration work. I'll do, you know, more extensive plyometrics if I'm doing tempo work, longer work, and I'll do, the most intense plyometrics when I'm doing my max velocity work.
Sure.
Um, and I think about those track days as over speed and over power days, right? Because it's like I'm never going, like, right now my peak speed's probably 19 miles per hour. I'm
Hmm.
not going to hit 19 miles per hour in parkour practice ever,
No.
right? But if I can get up to 20, 21 miles per hour, then hitting 14 miles per hour coming into a Kong Pre isn't going to feel as threatening to my nervous system.
So easy. Yeah.
So that's kind of the philosophy. Right now, my plyometrics feel. Oh, and I'll do some medicine ball throws when I'm out there doing plyometrics as well. Um, and my plyometrics, I'm really just going off feel right now. It's just like, this feels good. This feels like it's going to develop, right? But I do try to do just try to track certain things like, is my standing broad jump getting bigger, right? It's not the best plyometric, but it's really nice because it's measurable. And I always try to think about the balance between things that are feel based and that like I feel like they're really adding stuff to me, and then stuff
Yeah.
that are like, why do I back squat? Because um, it's a really effective driver of that like neural characteristics that I want.
Yeah.
Um, but also I know I know exactly how much stronger I'm getting and how to add a little bit, and even how it measures against other people. Whereas if I'm doing some David Weck kettlebell crazy
Yeah.
royal coil thing, it's like, oh, it's great. It feels good. I have no idea what the metrics are or how to like progress
Yeah.
myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Makes sense.
One of the things I notice when I run sprints, especially the longer extensive sprints, it's one of
Mm.
the most challenging things to my ankle and foot complex,
Mm.
right? Like that, it's like my hips are pretty strong, right? I can, back squat 325 for 7 um, at 225. Um, but I feel like what's always missing for me is stiffness in the foot and ankle complex. Like if I watch myself sprint, my technique looks good.
Yeah.
What you see is that like my heel comes down right away, stays down for a long time. It just doesn't recoil off the ground quickly.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I just need to build that ankle stiffness. So for me, it sounds like you'd probably say the same thing. Like get those long, you know,
Yep.
what would be like an extensive plyometric. Also, the other question I had about that would be, where would you program it in? Would you like do extensive plyometrics as a warm up for a parkour workout, or would you do it as a finisher for a parkour workout, or would you put it on a different day?
I'd probably do a little bit before parkour, and I would definitely just do a little bit before your speed session,
Mm-hmm.
or track session. And I think just getting an accumulation of volume over the week is what's going to benefit you massively. And then I would just look at, even if you could add in some kind of isometric strength in the gym of doing
Yeah,
some, you know,
I do though.
almost.
I do isometric stuff.
Yeah, a couple of isometrics to try and improve the stiffness complex of that. But I think it's probably dynamic stiffness that you probably lack. Could be coordinatively, it could be fatigue resistant stuff. So I think just bringing in a little bit of stuff for the lower body and gradually increasing the intensity of that stuff is what's going to be really valuable.
mm. So I will. So like a typical plyometrics for me would be like maybe like 3 or 4 times 10 yards of hops or
Mm-hmm.
and bounds.
Yep.
Um, maybe and then maybe like 50 yards of skipping,
Yep.
just like not super high intensity, just as part of the warm up. You
Yep.
know, some multi-directional stuff, some marching, kicking. Actually, this is one of the things that we're kind of running low on time here. But I was really curious. Maybe we'll pick this up on another time about thinking about things like tumbling,
Mm.
swinging on the bar, vaulting, dynos as
Mm-hmm.
as actually plyometrics if we turn them into that as tools and how we
Yeah.
can like conceptualize that.
Mm. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, I know. I was just gonna.
Dives quite
I'll just
depth on
tease it.
that. Yeah, yeah. It's
But
there's definitely something in that, and I think the typical like ancestral nature of things is that we are very much built to swing from our hands and to impact with our feet.
mhm,
Um, and yeah, a vault or a Kong is very much maintaining momentum more than it is creating momentum. I know some people will obviously try to achieve it, but the guys that are probably going to go the furthest are the ones that are able to take the most speed into it, I would imagine.
mhm.
And a lot of
Yeah.
that's generated from the ground takeoff, right? You've got that 2 foot boom boom into it, and then they'll use their hands as a carry through. Yeah, the research is is poor for upper body stuff. I'm not too keen to promote much of it because of the way that our wrist and our hand is built, and we don't have an Achilles in
Mhm.
our wrist
Yeah.
to control that, and our wrists are super fragile. Our hands are very fragile boned in comparison. We don't have a big um, subtalar joint and a talus in there that can really solidify like impact loading.
Yeah.
So it's there's a lot to be learned there, and I don't think training is going to break down that evolutionary kind of structure of the hand. So
Mhm.
we're meant to be able to hold more of a neutral wrist position and be able to swing and hang from that. We are very well built to do that, but take impact and to see forward translation of the forearm over the hand being fixed. I'm not so sure on training for that. It's a bit of a strange field for me, but
Yeah, it's very interesting meditation. One of the best parkour athletes in the country, one of the founders of Tempest Free Running, about 10 years ago, told me that he would do Kong vaults on his middle fingers just to teach himself to not focus on the push
yeah,
and make it all about his legs. And he said
interesting.
that he could do a Kong pre almost as far on his middle fingers as without. But on the other hand, I had the co-founder of the parkour gym I co-founded, Tyson Cheka,
Mm,
was an incredibly strong upper body athlete. He was
mm,
a former gymnast, huge shoulders, huge arms, and he was
mm,
kind of famous for his ability to get a massive additional force from his kongs. It looked like he jumped with his legs again. And so he could do things like Kong off of one surface and then go up to a much higher surface and then Kong the second surface because of you could see him descend into his shoulders and push through it. But he was a very uniquely built individual, very different sort of physical affordances from most people.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting to see that.
So I know we're pretty much out of time here. Um, yeah, we're pretty much out of time here, so I'll save it. I definitely want to talk to you about the role of deep tier and yielding isometrics as well at some point, because I think that's a super interesting conversation. But I guess what I'll do is just say, if folks are interested in your perspective, you've got a huge amount of stuff available on that. You can get into the Matt's concept of deep tier, light tier, ping tier plyometrics, the role of extensive plyometrics. You put up a ton of information on your Instagram and on your YouTube. Is there anything else people should know about you? You have a bunch of programs available online as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. So my business plus pliers, which you can find through my Instagram. We deliver programs for. We have a wide variety of plyometric programs that has all different ways of laying it out. Whether it's a 2 day, 2 a week, 3 a week, 4 a week kind of spread. So it basically just thins out over those sessions, so you can fit it in if it doesn't fit with two bigger sessions. Honestly, the amount of different types of sport I've had on there is kind of, I didn't even think that I would be teaching these people plyometrics is so vast. And then if you want to learn about the coaching side of it, we've got an introduction to coaching plyometrics course on there. And for you parkour guys, maybe the return to dynamic movement program we have would be really valuable for your for your lower legs.
Okay,
But yeah, all super easy to find through my Instagram.
sweet. Well, thanks very much for joining me. It was a super interesting conversation. It was really a very different sort of direction that we started with, and it just felt like I said to you before, I like to follow the logos, and it felt like the conversation you were interested in, right? Like you've probably answered the questions about ping tier and deep tier and light tier about 50,000 times on podcasts. So it was
Yeah,
fun to go deep on the sensitivity and feel aspect of coaching. And thanks
yeah,
for bringing that and being open to it. And I definitely look forward to a
I
future
appreciate it.
conversation.
Yeah. It's just great to do that rather than make it so strict and stuff. It's just great to just go with the quality of the conversation and stuff. So I appreciate that, and thank you for having me on.
Cool. See you soon.
Thank you.